Welcome to Boundaries and Beyond, the podcast that empowers you to set boundaries and nurture self-care, as well as have happier, healthier relationships. I'm Jennifer, your co-host.
And I'm Dr. Pokerel, your other co-host. And joining us is Trinity, the real junkyard dog.
Say hello.
And sometimes Toby doesn't want to be left out, so
yeah,
he's spread out in the front of us.
Yes. I hear the term boundaries thrown around a lot these days, but what does that term actually mean? We're here to clear all that up.
In every episode, we'll break it all down for you, share practical tips for building better boundaries so you can have healthier, happier, more balanced lives. And yes, we are that good.
Oh my goodness.
Hello, folks. Before we start this month's episode, we really wanted to give you a synopsis of the movie Gaslight for those of you that may not have seen the movie. Spoiler, if you haven't watched it and you want to watch it, you might want to pause here, go watch it, and then come back. We are going to focus on the 1944 version of Gaslight, directed by George Cukor and starring Ingrid Bergman and Charles Boyer, along with Joseph Cotten and Angeline Lansbury, who you will recognize from Murder, She Wrote. It is a psychological thriller set in Victorian London. The story centers on Paula Ahlquist, a young woman traumatized by the murder of her famous opera singer aunt, Alice Ahlquist, while Paula was still a child. This happened in their London home, and Paula found the body. She was then orphaned and sent to Italy, where she grows up under the care of her aunt's friend and becomes a singer herself. Years later, Paula marries Gregory Anton, her accompanist. After a brief romance, the couple then returns to her aunt's long-abandoned townhome in London. This is where the murders took place, keep in mind. Gregory's behavior soon turns controlling and sinister. He isolates Paula from friends and neighbors, and he hires a maid by the name of Nancy. This is played by Angela Lansbury. And they begin to subtly manipulate Paula's environment. He accuses her of forgetfulness, hides objects, and insists that she is unwell, all while she is experiencing strange occurrences in the house, such as flickering gas lights, mysterious noises from the attic that Gregory dismisses as her imagination. As Paula's confidence and sanity begin to unravel under Gregory's psychological abuse, she becomes convinced she is losing her mind. Meanwhile, Inspector Brian Cameron of Scotland Yard, who was an admirer of Paula's aunt, begins to grow suspicious of Gregory's intentions and investigates the old murder. He discovers that Gregory is actually a man by the name of Sergius Bauer, who was wanted for Alice's murder. That's Paula's aunt. It turns out he married Paula to gain access to the house and to search for Alice's missing jewels. The truth is revealed when Cameron intervenes, exposing Gregory's scheme and confirming Paula's sanity. The jewels are then found to be hidden in Alice's costume, and then Gregory is apprehended. In the film's climax, Paula confronts her tormentor, reclaiming her sense of self and agency. So Gaslight has become renowned for its atmospheric suspense for the time, Ingrid Bergman's Oscar-winning performance. By the way, most of the stars in the show were nominated for an Academy Award. And its cultural impact. The term gaslighting to this day describes psychological manipulation that makes someone doubt their reality, a phenomenon that is central to the film's plot. And with that, we'll move on to the episode. We'll do a deeper dive into the movie from a psychological standpoint and the role that boundaries play in the storyline.
Have you ever wondered about the term gaslighting? Or maybe you're wondering whether or not you or a loved one have been gaslit. Well, in the last few episodes that Dr. P and I did on the dark triad, which is psychopathy, narcissism, and Machiavellianism, we spoke about gaslighting a few times, and that term was got a lot of feedback. People were wondering what it meant, commenting on the history and things like that. So Dr. P and I decided to do a deep dive. We did our homework and watched the movie Gaslight. So Dr. P, you're the movie buff. Would you like to fill us in on the movie Gaslighting?
Well, the interesting thing, we got got so many questions and comments about the movie, even about misconceptions and stuff like that. So the last time I watched the movie was about 30 years ago. I'm aging myself here. It was a long time ago that I watched the movie.
And
anyway,
it was an old movie even back then.
and even back then was an old movie. Yes, that was before the era of black and white. So if you really want to go there, I watched it on VHS. That's how old I am. And the interesting thing is, I didn't realize there were two versions of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So first, we got to credit the original. It was written by the British playwright Patrick Hamilton. The movie is set in Victorian England around the 1880s. But there were two versions. One was a British film, 1940. It started Anton Walbrook and Diana Wynyard, and those do not know who they are. I'd never heard of them before. But then Hollywood did another version in 1944. Of course, it was still set in Victorian England, and it starred Charles Boyer and Ingrid Bergman. And Angela Lansbury was in the second film, in the 1944 version. And I think when I saw it, thinking about it, because I didn't recognize the actors initially, I think I saw the 1940 version. And that's where one of my comments about Angela Lansbury was much more attractive back then came from the actress who played the maid back then, and now I got to look up her name because I do not recall her name. She's an unknown. I don't think she did anything else after that. I think it was Barbara Everest. I may have this wrong, and I'm sure somebody's going to correct us online like they did with the other comments that we had. So the point being, Angela Lansbury was in the second film, the 1944 version. Sorry, the 1940 version. Okay, so it looks like, no, it was Mimi Reiner that played the maid. I think their name was Elizabeth. And in that version, there is actually not a very clear, but seems to be an affair between the husband and the maid. In the 1944 version, there was not an affair. And that's sometimes people came over and corrected where the affair come from. One of the things is that we commented that the gas light that was used to light up the house back then was turned up and down. And then the lead of Gregory, played by Charles Boyer, kept saying that there is no changes in the light. Now, what people were saying is that he would go into another room, mess in the room, and that would drain the light. That's true, but he wasn't actually adjusting the gas light per se, but in the first version he was. He was actually adjusting the light back and forth and then saying that he didn't do it. So the first version, by the way, I should say that 1940 version, the British film, was more loyal to the original play. I never saw the play. That's what the critics say. So I'll take the word for it. Anyway, so those were some of the discrepancies, and there does seem to be the story is a little bit different, but the theme of the story is the same for both films. Would you agree?
Yeah. Basically, I feel like Gregory he was the husband, right? That he was more manipulative in the second version.
In the Hollywood version, in the 44 version. Also, I found the Hollywood version much better made. The acting was better. The production was better. And it was certainly more entertaining in the Hollywood version. And as maybe what would be expected. But nevertheless, both films were interesting and doesn't take away from the screenplay of the film, which was very, very well depicted. And we were surprised because, back then when I first saw it, I think I was in college when I saw it. Again, VHS, college, you can figure out there, more or less my age. But it was so relevant to our current themes. And even gaslighting today is so relevant that I think we were both surprised. I'm seeing it from a different lens now. I thought it was worth watching it, but when we saw that there were two films, we had to watch them both. So I cannot criticize either film negatively, I mean, because they were so well made, both of them, even for the era.
Yeah.
And somebody made a funny comment about the looks of the actresses, and that men would notice that. And I think it's relevant I think it's relevant to the story that the maid was attractive in the first one. She was actually more attractive than the lead character. In the second film, she was not.
Yeah.
Because Ingrid Bergman played the role. It was meant to attract audiences. She was, I didn't know this, but Ingrid Bergman is the second most decorated Hollywood actress in history. And I did not know this. I think the only other person that had more Oscars than her was, if I remember correctly, was Meryl Streep. Ingrid Bergman was clearly the focus of the second film. Well, in the first one, it was a little bit more, the maid was a more attractive character. And I think that matters in the storyline because the lead actor, in the second film, he was called Gregory. In the first film, 1940, his name was Paul.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
His name was Paul in the first version.
That was a little confusing.
Yeah, it was because the lead character in the second version is Paula. So it was a little bit hard to keep the names straight after we saw them both. So I think it's relevant because he does seek to have an affair with the maid, and he is pushing aside the character of Paula. And I know this is going to be confusing. After this first part, we're going to just focus on the 1944 version. But Bella was the role of the lead actress, the one that was being gaslit, and the lead actor was seeking an affair with the maid. So, and the actresses in both cases were the ones that had money, and he was going after their money, right? So anyway, do you have any comments about that? Do you agree, disagree? Any other comments about the films? I know that was probably going back and forth a little confusing, but I don't think that's our whole point. It was just some differences between the films.
Yeah. So there were some, like you said, minor differences. So, and that's where most of the comments were. Some people wanted to argue with whether or not one thing happened in another.
Right, on the details. And some of the confusion may have come because there's two films.
And a play.
Yeah, for all those you movie nerds that keep going back and forth, there's two films, watch them both, and then we can talk.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. We have to know now, what is Trinity wearing?
Well, in honor of old Hollywood, she is wearing her fur coat trimmed in fake mink. Otherwise, she'd probably try to eat it. And I don't know if this is rabbit fur or what, but it's very soft. And
Is it real fur? Or?
The rabbit fur, I think, is, but the collar, I don't think is real, but I couldn't be 100%.
Where would you find this kind of stuff for a dog?
Well, Irina is on Etsy, and she makes some of the most beautiful. I've noticed most of her little outfits are more winter, but she makes the most beautiful little dresses and coats for doggies.
And we don't have any financial interest, or we don't have any kickbacks from this. We just mention it in case anybody's looking to purchase. Okay, so let's move on. One of the things that we were very struck by the film is the relevance to the term gaslight in modernity and the dark tetrad. Because it wasn't just the dark triad that we were looking at. We were looking at a dark tetrad situation here.
Yeah. And
we promise this will be the last episode that we run on the dark triad, dark tetrad. But it was so we got so much traction with Gaslight that we decided to do this. So let's start with the narcissism. What do you think about that?
Well, I just remember the contemptuous looks he would give her when she was thinking that she was breaking down and becoming crazy, and he would just literally look down his nose at her. He just acted like he was superior to her, especially towards the end, and insinuated that he was superior to her and that she must look to him for guidance, and kind of like a child. He started treating her more like a child towards the end. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was the initial part. And again, we're focusing on the 1944 version because there's, if you watch both films, they're a little bit different. So there is a sense initially that he treats her like an equal
Yeah.
before they move into the new home. So he's trying to seduce her. He finally marries her, gets her to marry him. And then he starts becoming more and more condescending as the film goes on.
Yeah.
Starting with there are no sounds.
Yeah.
There is no changes in the gaslight. One particular scene, again present in both films, is where he removes a picture in the wall and hides it and asks her, "What did you do with the picture?" And she keeps saying, I don't know where it is. So he looks at her in a very menacing way, and as if there's an implied threat there that later becomes evident later in the film that he might commit her.
Yeah.
But she finally very slowly walks over to a table, looks behind a table, and pulls it out. And he says, "So you did know where it was?" And she says, "No, that's just where it was last time." So he clearly he's playing these mind games with her. And the narcissism comes is that he thinks he can get away with it.
Yeah.
And he thinks he can fool everybody indefinitely. And by the way, if you haven't watched the movie, here's a spoiler alert. 3, 2, 1. He is trying to get a fortune or money or jewels from her.
Yeah.
Because obviously she has significant amount of wealth. And that's the reason he marries her. And he tries to keep the jewels. In both films, they're trying to find the jewels, some jewels that she has.
Well, the first film fills us in, and it shows him killing the aunt, strangling her. And she was apparently some sort of theatrical famous person, and one of her costumes had real jewels sewn into him. And so
Actually, I think that was the second film.
well, yeah, the second film they were sewn in.
They were sewn in, and they were essentially she was hiding them in plain sight.
Yeah. But the first film, she's just a wealthy old lady.
So the point is that there's some jewels, they're precious stones.
Yeah.
That's what he wants. That's what he's after.
Yeah, and he couldn't find them.
He couldn't find them.
So, and so that's part of the reason why he marries her, is because that's the way to get back inside of the house where he can search for the jewels.
Right. And they have an attic. And one is the house next door. The other one's the attic, or a room above. And he climbs into that area. He sneaks in there and looks around, and he's searching for the jewels.
Yeah.
That's where he turns the lights on. The gas lights go down, but still remains that he keeps telling her there's no changes in the gas lights.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And which I guess he's an opportunist, right? That's a narcissist, Machiavellian kind of person. He took the opportunity of her thinking, "Oh, Gregory or Paul or whichever one he was, that every time you leave, the gas lights go down, and I get so scared." And so he took that as an opportunity to start freaking her out and telling her, "Oh, that's not true. The gas lights aren't going down." And so.
Right. And the other thing is that he dismisses her as being hysterical.
Yeah.
Which was a term that was a common term used because it comes from hysteria, or literally the Greek term is the floating uterus. And that was a time when Sigmund Freud was using that kind of terminology, hysteria, neurosis, etc. So anyway, so dismisses her as hysterical and even threatens to commit her and have a doctor come in and evaluate her.
Yeah. One you wanted me to bring up, one that I was writing in my notes as I was watching the movie, was stonewalling. He stonewalls her a lot, and that's another narcissistic move. Not a lot of people stonewall, but that's something typical of a narcissist. That, oh, you're irritating me. I'm not going to talk to you.
Yes. And I'm going to leave you. And a couple of times, he actually walks out on her leaving, and she can't stand it when he leaves.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is the threat of abandonment, right? So, okay. So the Machiavellianism, we already talked about quite a bit. The scheming. I mean, this was a well thought out plan, long term. So, what in that show Grifters, they would call this the long con. If you watch any of the con movies, short con versus long con. So, or the long game, playing the long game. So, tries to marries her for the purpose of infiltrating her life, and then that'll take us to the parasitic aspect of it in a second. But marries her, gets her to move back into the house. So they were both living outside. I don't remember where they were living in the first one. I think it was somewhere in Italy, right?
Well, they were just dating in the beginning.
Was that it?
Yeah.
Okay. But in the Ingrid Bergman version, they were living in Italy. They got married in Italy, and then they decided to move. He said, for your sake, so you can get back to London, because she's originally from London. So you can get back to London. We'll move into your old house.
Yeah. And she's like not having it because that's where she was traumatized, where her aunt was killed. And
I guess we left that part out, didn't we?
Yeah.
Because she watched her aunt get killed in that house. And her aunt raised her.
She didn't watch it. She wasn't there, but she came in and saw her aunt who
found her dead.
Yeah,
found her dead. That's what it was. She found her dead. So let's link this up a little bit, because there is the trauma that Paula, Ingrid Bergman, was essentially an orphan. Her parents died. And I don't remember when, where, how that happened, but her parents died, and she was raised by her aunt. And when she was about 10 years old, that's when she found her aunt dead. And she was an orphan and raised by her aunt, and then she found her dead. So there's a lot of abandonment issues that she has, right? And those are played out surprisingly well. Is part of the scheme that the lead Gregory understands that she has this intense fear of abandonment.
Yeah.
Gets her to fall in love with him. And
intense fear of the house.
Moves her in. She starts doubting her reality.
But it was masterful how he manipulated her into moving into that house, because he first said, oh, I've always wanted to move to London. And she's like, oh, no. And then he starts describing the perfect place. And of course, it's this house. And she mentioned, I think she mentioned that she lived in a house like that, but she could never live there. And she explains how terrified she is of it. But then he just brushes it off and tells her how he's there to protect her and blah, 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 and manipulates her very masterfully into moving into this house that terrifies her.
Okay, so let's just talk about boundaries there for a second, because she was so profoundly neglected as a child and traumatized as a child that she became a people pleaser. So she really couldn't say no to him and wanted to please him so that he wouldn't abandon her. And that's why she committed to that move into that house, because of the people pleasing concept. So he knew. We've talked about how boundaries would protect you in a situation like that, right? Having healthy boundaries. So she clearly doesn't have healthy boundaries. She can't say no. She can't stand up to him.
And predators prey on those kind of individuals,
right.
Sadly enough. Yeah.
That's exactly what happens. So when we have those healthy boundaries, we are not going to get caught up in the people pleasing aspect of it and then end up in a situation like this,
Yeah.
man or woman, right? And then we keep saying that your best defense against something like this is to have healthy boundaries. And this is a good example of how that works. And again, we were just so surprised by how well depicted this is in the
Yeah.
movie. So it's not just one of those things where it's just a movie.
They don't, when you hear us complain about they don't make movies like this anymore, this is what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a well-made psychological
Thriller.
I would say psychological drama, but you can argue that it's a thriller. Okay, so let's move on to psychopathy because he's parasitic. He wants the money. He's living off of her. She's the one with the money, the house, etc. And he wants to remove those assets from her. And the other part about the psychopathy is he's callous. He does not care. He's very cavalier about her reaction. Oh, you're just hysterical. Oh, you're imagining things. And then there's a scene where they go to a concert, like a piano concert, and it was very upscale, like all the elite of London. It just seems like it's even in a royalty home. And he asks her, where is the, what was it that he lost something, a brooch or a clip, something that was important to him that he, all of a sudden, it was a brooch, right? And then she kept saying, I didn't take him. This is in the middle of the concert. So he grabs her purse and looks through it and finds it and pulls it out. And then she has...
In the middle of the concert.
In the middle of the concert, she starts crying. She becomes...
Uncontrollable.
Well, she becomes hysterical. And at this point, she's just losing her mind. And he does not care. He designed that. He does not care how she looks in front of this, remember, Victorian England. So
it plays right into his game. You know, everybody's gonna, when she disappears, everybody's gonna feel so sorry for him because he's got a crazy wife.
yeah, imagine that, having to deal with this crazy person. And he seems perfectly normal and reasonable, and she's the one bawling and fainting. So,
well, this also kills two birds with one stone, right? Because originally he didn't want to go to the theater, and she begged and begged, and somehow he ends up talking him into going to the theater. And but his whole aim is, one by one, he's isolating her from family and friends, and that's exactly what an abuser does. I was even struck by, and this I don't believe was known until the FBI profiler years, but he threatens to hurt her dog, to harm her dog.
That's right. I'd forgotten about that.
That's a classic psychopath.
Yeah.
I mean, whoa, that, like, whoever wrote this had to have known one of these kind of people.
Yeah, all the elements are there and well depicted.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I certainly watched it from a different lens than I did back then. I enjoyed it back then. This time I was enthralled.
Yeah.
Just watching the whole process and recognizing all the elements.
The interesting thing is it starts off very subtle. And this is a true, he starts off very charming and suave and handsome and dashing and all that kind of stuff. He's charismatic, but little by little he starts picking at her. Oh, you're a little bit forgetful, but then a little forgetful turns into, oh, you're so insane. You're misplacing things and hiding them. It becomes just downright evil.
Yeah, and going back to the narcissism part and the sadistic part, we kind of alluded to the sadism, which is the fourth aspect of the tetrad. But remember the part where he starts to belittle her in front of the maid about the makeup.
Yes. Yeah,
See,
that was cruel. And that was in that was
the beginning.
kind of the beginning where he compliments the maid on her
Makeup.
makeup and and he knows that the maid is kind of dismissive of Paula and she doesn't like that. And then right in front of Paula says, "Why don't you teach Paula how to do her makeup like you do?"
Right.
And back then, wearing makeup was only for, kind of the ladies of the night or tart little loose women.
And that actually is portrayed in the first one, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
The first film.
yeah.
I know we said we'd stick to the second one, but some of the elements in the first film are actually important and where they weren't left out, but they were
Kind of brushed over.
well, no, they were better depicted in the first film. Like for example, this part about in the first film, the maid is more attractive than the Bella, the lead character. In the second film, Ingrid Bergman is one of the most beautiful women in Hollywood. That didn't fly. So you could get away with if she recognized you, she could have said, "Are you insane?
Yeah.
I mean, have you looked at me?" But in the first film, that plays very well. The insecurities about her beauty could have been very well used against her. So I don't think those issues about the beauty between the maid and the lead character are insignificant. So, okay. So the other thing is the mocking about her confusion,
Yeah.
and that was relentless, right? That was part
Yeah.
of the sadism.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't just telling her, "No, this is not happening," or "You're imagining things." It's mocking her.
It's like, "Oh, are you having another one of your episodes?"
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it was very,
Condescending.
very condescending. And again, the acting in the second film was much better acting. And I'm not a movie critic, but it seemed like to me like it was better acted. I mean, do you agree or?
Yeah, the first part was kind of as you would expect, where it was like, it was kind of little cheesy and overdone. Not as bad as a
So
lot of
overacting, you're talking about overacting?
yeah,
It
yeah.
was a little bit cheesy.
It wasn't as bad as most Hollywood films of that era, but then the second one was
No, Ingrid Bergman was superb. Her when she was starting to that scene in the concert when he's digging through her purse and you see that she's building up, you can actually watch her face.
like
In
she's
the first
trying.
film, I was watching him undo the thing. In the second film, I was watching Ingrid Bergman's reaction.
Yeah.
It was so well done.
Yeah.
You can feel that she's looking and she knows what's coming and she's just anticipating it, and then it just bubbles up.
Yeah, yeah, and she's
Erupts, I should say. She's trying to keep
and then that's really hard. Most actors get this wrong. Is she's trying to suppress it, and it just like eventually it just bursts out, and she can't hold it back anymore.
Yes. So, so that element, and he wanted to bring that reaction out of her in public.
Yeah,
And set her up for the whole thing. And if I remember correctly, she was so happy that she was finally going to go out.
yeah, yeah.
That it just disrupted her night. It's just like her whole world sunk.
Surrounding that whole scene where first she wants to go out really really bad, and he's at first leading her on, and then he's like, wait a minute, if I'm remembering correctly, I might be getting both of them cross-pollinated, but he was like, no, you know how you are, that you don't want to have an episode in front of people. And she begs and begs, and then he starts giving in, and she's so happy, and he's playing the piano like he's so happy celebrating with her. And then is that when he saw the picture and the picture was missing? And then
maybe we are maybe confusing the sequences. They're a little bit different in the films.
it's like he went back and like he's toying with her like a cat and a mouse. Like then he starts scolding her, and then somehow she manages to convince him that they've got to go to the theater. And so then again, she's really, really happy. She's happy to be there. She's happy to see everybody. She's old friends, and she's so excited. And she's listening to the music, and she's swaying to the music, and just getting so into it. And that's when he takes her purse, really just so sly, takes her purse, and he looks in there, and he can't find the brooch or whatever. And she sees out of the corner of her eye what he's doing, and it just takes all the joy out of what she was experiencing, which is exactly what he
was trying to do.
Yeah, he was enjoying it the whole time.
Okay, so we talked about the setup, right? Mm-hmm. The pre-gaslighting era, where he seduces her, brings her into the relationship, and then once he traps her in the marriage, mm-hmm. then he starts his plan of and pretty much destroying her psychologically.
Yeah, and one could say she was actually looking for a savior. You know, she'd been through all this trauma. All of the closest people to her had died, and she's looking for love, for friendship, for somebody who really cared about her. And he really filled those shoes in the beginning. That's how he drew her in. And so he's just a master chameleon. He can be anything you want him to be, but only for so long. You know, these kind of people can't last forever.
Well, and then before we get to the end, mm-hmm. so initially, knowing a lot of what I know now, there's a point where I felt frustration with her. Mm. Because it was becoming obvious that the guy was over the top and manipulating her. And initially, she seems like a sympathetic character. But at what point does one get frustrated with her? It's like, can't you see what's going on? Mm-hmm. Do you not want to see what's going on? And I don't think at some point, I think she didn't want to. Mm-hmm. Because when the inspector and two different inspectors, they have different names in the movies, and the two different movies. Mm-hmm. They come and try to explain to her, you're being gaslit. They didn't use that term. They said, he's driving you crazy on purpose. Mm-hmm. He's making you think. She denies it. She actually defends him.
Yeah, yeah.
So at that point...
In the second one, yeah.
I believe it happened in the first one. She wasn't too receptive, but I could be wrong about that.
It was the second one, because I was really thrown by that, how she had changed, that her personality was quite a bit more which was very typical of a victim. It's almost like it is Stockholm syndrome, where they begin to sympathize with the abuser, and she feels it's her fault. He is the way he is. And so that one was more true to true victims of the abuser. And so I was even struck by that they got that part right, which we have a cop friend, and he says that's a real thing. You go in to save the person who's being beat on and within an inch of their life. And you have to also be aware that they often will turn on the police officer. The abusee, the victim, will often turn on the cop, because it's like
they're defending the abuser.
Yeah, exactly.
That's Cartman's triangle.
Exactly. And that's why you do see a lot of victim blaming with people, because they don't understand, how can you be lured in by this but this movie does such a great job of explaining how you get lured into this, how someone can get lured into this.
They don't even want to be rescued.
Exactly, because they don't know anything different.
So I think the point is, you can't rescue somebody. You can only bring them. It's the old adage that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly.
And that's what we're looking at. So that's where we're responsible for our own reality. Mm-hmm. Even though she's the victim.
Yeah.
What about the victim put her in that position. And I think that's what we're always saying with boundaries is, because our frustration is often when we're working with couples is when they can't see the reality.
Yeah.
And they can't actually start applying those healthy boundaries. And it takes a lot for that to happen. Luckily, when they work on themselves and one of them starts to get healthy, then things start getting better for both of them.
Yeah.
If one of them just starts getting healthy, things start to improve for both of them.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was very well depicted. By the way, Cartman's triangle, triangulation. Essentially, you got three people that one of them's being pulled to the side of the other individual so they can triangulate against the third person. So essentially, they join forces to gain power over another person. And that happens in relationships. So we're often trying to point out triangulation because that's very dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And that is a lack of boundaries. It's trying to get a one-up position on another individual. So in this case, which was legitimate for the policeman to step in, a legitimate situation, she was rejecting it. And that's where I think my point about the frustration was, at what point, and I knew what was happening. I knew the ending already, but I was like, what point are you going to wake up? And there is a point where the reality is just too much for her to deny. And that's that proverbial rock bottom.
Yeah.
Is where you're hit with the pain. He's not the person you expected. He's not who you think. He's not who you thought he was. And that can result in finally that splash of cold water hitting you in the face.
There was another, I don't know if it was Cartman's triangle, but where in the beginning where he's sure to drive a wedge between, and I didn't understand this in the beginning why, until later I started really kind of analyzing the film, but he drives a wedge between the maid and Paula in the very beginning because they're about the same age.
You're talking about the housekeeper, the older housekeeper, right?
No, the younger one.
Okay.
The younger one. That's where he tells her that in the very beginning, he tells both the housekeepers that, she's not right, or she's,
I see what you're saying. Okay.
yeah, that she's a little crazy or something like that. And, so they were both very standoffish of her. And so he's setting up the scene in the very early beginnings to she's crazy, and to where she couldn't ally with the two maids because naturally if somebody's living in your house, you're going to talk to them and build up a warm, friendly relationship. Well, she couldn't with either one because they thought she was crazy.
Right, right. And they were actually treating her as an invalid, a crazy person. And that reinforced the perception or her perception that she was losing her mind.
And of course, he's on a pedestal because, he's such a wonderful man to put up with her.
Right. And that was just all part of the plan.
Yeah.
Okay. So the other part about her, about the victim, is the cycle of idealization where he, at the very beginning, he props her up like she's the ideal wife, right? I love you so much. I can't live without you. And then he devalues her.
Yeah.
So then she feels at the very beginning how great he is and how important she is to the relationship. And then he starts devaluing her.
And at first she's not buying it.
She's resistant.
Yeah, and he's very subtle about it. But little by little, he's proving to her, he's showing his case that yes, you're insane.
Right.
And the more he starts chipping away at her self-image, her ego, the more he can shape her and mold her into what he needs, which is a very dependent invalid, somebody that's insane and needs to depend on him for her reality. She needs him to tell me what's real.
And as he brings her down, then he comes back and props her back up.
Yeah.
and then props her back up and then brings her back down. So propping her back up like, you're wonderful, I'm going to take you out and display you, but which, by the way, displays her like a trophy to high society, only to devalue her in front of them.
Yeah.
So that's classic narcissism: is value them, devalue them, value. So idealization and then devaluation is what narcissists do to keep somebody dependent on them. So it's a matter of keeping them dependent.
Yeah.
But going back to one of the things we talk about healthy boundaries is putting somebody on a pedestal is a boundary violation. So whether I'm putting you on a pedestal or you're putting me on a pedestal, that has to stop. We recognize that the minute it happens, we got to address that with each other. Luckily, we've been in enough therapy now that we don't do that to each other, but we recognize it when we see it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing about having healthy boundaries, is you recognize that cycle. So you're not going to have somebody devalue you, and you're not going to have somebody put you on a pedestal, because they're both wrong.
Yeah.
They're both boundary violations. They're both.
And we all have a tendency to put people on a pedestal, whether it's a doctor or a teacher or a professor or someone famous in Hollywood.
They're just human.
They're just human, just like the rest of us. They burp, they fart, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like the rest of us. So that's really important to kind of do that inward reflection whenever you see someone that you really admire, and ask yourself, am I putting this person on a pedestal? Can I see that this person makes mistakes too? Can I listen to this person talk to me and not take everything as the gospel truth, and use my critical thinking? So we really need to do that self-reflection. If somebody's giving you feedback, feedback is great, and it's great to have someone willing to share that feedback with you. That takes a lot of bravery, but if that person, we also need to reflect on that feedback and ask ourselves, does that ring true? And I need to be real honest with myself. Maybe I am making a mistake here, but does this ring true? And if you are confused about it, use someone else as a sounding board, and someone who doesn't know that same person, a friend or a counselor, a mentor, family member, and ask them, is this true about me? And see what they say. Somebody that you can trust will give you an honest opinion.
And that's the importance of the support group that we often talk about to keep us centered.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're not going offline or one up, one down.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last thing about the movie is that it is a psycho thriller. So there's got to be some violence at the end, even in the 1940s Hollywood films.
Yeah, that part was cheesy.
Well, the first one was, right?
The second one at the end was cheesy.
I guess it was cheesy
how he ended up tied to the chair or magically tied. And then they untie him and he just magically gets up like a good, obedient prisoner and walks.
That was cheesy. The end, I will say, the end was cheesy. They could have done without that, just the police showing up. But this was a violent criminal. So at some point there was going to be some kind of violence, right?
Yeah.
And that adds to the excitement.
I guess they didn't have stuntmen like they did they do now.
I'm pretty sure they did, but the question is, they didn't have special effects. I think that may be what you're getting at.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit, the first one, the 1940 film, the fight at the end was very cheesy.
Yeah.
But anyway, that doesn't take away from the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So if any of you are interested in learning more about the gaslighting, you should watch the movie. It is very entertaining, especially the 1944 version. And it is fun to watch, and it's fun to analyze it as you go along. And we recommend trying to identify all the boundary violations as you go.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we see this happening to somebody else, it's like, wait a minute, this is happening to me too.
Yeah.
It may not be your spouse, but it may be a friend that's pulling these these lines on you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's worth a watch.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All
Okay.
right.
All right. So there's a new segment we're gonna introduce, right?
Yeah.
So it's we're gonna end up with a professional dad joke. So
Oh boy.
so what do you know why Tigger's always so dirty?
Oh gosh. No. Why? Why is Tigger so dirty?
Because he plays with poo. Wait, those are. There we go. There we
I
go.
think the first one was better. People
Okay.
running away. Thousands of people, little feet running away.
Trinity has something to say about
Oh,
that.
she's really groaning. That was awful. She even makes a puke face at that. Right, Trinity?
Okay, so this will be our last episode. Unless you guys want more, let us know what you think about the movie Gaslight. And if you have any more comments or questions, we'd like to hear about them. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, that's it. Trinity, you got anything? No. Okay. Oh God.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today at Boundaries and Beyond. We would love for you to like and share with all those boundaryless friends and family members out there, as well as subscribe to our podcast. Also, please join us on Instagram at Boundaries Beyond Podcast. See you then.
See you then.